You're listening to the Transport for the North podcast.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Transport for the North podcast. Today I'm joined by Tom Jarvis and Tom Mace, who are both in our policy team, covering transport-related social exclusion and the cost of living crisis and the impact that that's had on the transport-related social exclusion policy. So we'll just kick in now straight away, straight to Tom Jarvis. So could you just give like a brief overview of the TRSE policy, where it's originated from, how it all works?
Thanks, James. So our work on transport-related social exclusion started with the commitment in our 2019 Strategic Transport Plan to enhancing health opportunities and equality for all. And on the basis of that commitment, we first undertook to significantly expand the depth and extent of evidence that we had on the TRSE challenge in the North. What we found at the start of that research process is, while there was a lot of evidence available from particular towns or particular cities within the North and elsewhere, we didn't have the kind of systematic, high quality evidence base that's required to get a comprehensive understanding of this issue across the North as a whole. So on the basis of that, we undertook a quite extensive programme of primary research in 2021. That included survey, focus group and interview work with communities and key stakeholders in a range of different environments and contexts across the North. And we published a research report on the basis of that. And we also used that evidence, that primary research evidence base, to develop a data tool that examines variations in transport-related social exclusion across the North and across England as a whole. On the basis of that data tool, we identified that 3.3 million people in the North live in areas with a high risk of social exclusion, specifically because of issues with the transport system. And that generally means that there's a combination of poor access to key destinations with the transport options available. It also typically means significant transport inequalities between what's accessible by active travel, public transport and car travel, and that's typically happening in a context of high levels of deprivation. And that means that those transport issues don't just cause a major inconvenience, they have a fundamental effect on the ability of people to access jobs or education, healthcare, other key services, and the things that many of us really take for granted. And we then used that data tool and that research report to develop our Connecting Communities strategy. And that strategy breaks down the significant challenge that we see in the North into a set of policy actions and a set of concrete steps that can be taken by TFN and by our partners in order to really make significant progress on that TRSE issue. And that includes an ambition to reduce the number of people facing a high risk of transport-related social exclusion by 1 million by 2050. As part of that, we made a number of commitments to expand the evidence base on a number of related areas, issues connecting to TRSE. That includes the work that Tom Mace has led on transport-related social exclusion and the cost of living. It also includes further research work to understand the impacts of severance and also the legacies of the COVID-19 pandemic for communities affected by TRSE.
So thank you, Tom. So as the policy has progressed over time, we're now looking into the future. Where are we at now, and sort of what does the future look like for this area of work, would you say?
I think one of our key priorities through the Connecting Communities strategy has really been to embed transport-related social exclusion into decision-making for ourselves and also for our local authority and other partners, and really enabling them to make investment decisions and other decisions that prioritise communities that are at highest risk of transport-related social exclusion. And our data tool is one of the main ways that we're enabling our partners to do that. Alongside that, we are this year undertaking some further primary research to explore experiences of TRSE in a further range of area types. We're undertaking survey work in August and September of this year in Liverpool, Leeds, Richmondshire, Craven, York and Middlesbrough, and that'll particularly focus on people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, those on low incomes and in insecure work, and those with care and responsibilities. And what we're trying to do is to understand how those groups of people who tend to have higher risk of TRSE experience that issue in a broader range of contexts than we were able to explore with our previous research. And we'll be publishing a further research report on the back of that survey work. We'll also then be using that to enhance and expand what our TRSE data tool is able to do, including taking greater account of issues like affordability and resilience in rural communities in particular.
Thank you, Tom. So just to move on to the cost of living report that Tom Maith, our social research officer, put together, sort of how does that link into the TRSE work? I know Tom Jarvis has sort of covered it a bit there, but obviously as your area of work, could you sort of give us an idea of where this all fits into our priorities?
Yeah, thanks, James. So yeah, it fits into kind of the wider TRSE work we're doing because, as Tom said, it's in our Connecting Community strategy that we published in May of this year. So it's definitely a research goal for us to kind of undertake, and we obviously have done. And it fits in because we found through the research that the people who are most at risk from any impacts associated with the cost of living pressures are also the same groups of people who are the most at risk from transport-related social exclusion. So they do go hand in hand, they do affect each other, and that was kind of the reason for wanting to understand this so we can add it to our evidence base and enhance this evidence base that we've got. And that was definitely kind of what came up in our primary research into the cost of living, is that people were definitely showing that there is a clear link between the two.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. So I think obviously it's all quite a complex area of work that's been undergone. With the reports obviously looking to launch over the next few weeks, do you see this as being something that's quite a long-term project, or would you say at the moment there's likely to be much change in the short term?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a long piece of work, to be honest. We can see that through just general cost of living trends and statistics that inflation is easing. It is technically and officially getting a little bit better. But again, from the research we did, which wasn't at the peak of high inflation, at the peak of the cost of living crisis, people were still having lots of different impacts of it. So it's definitely here to stay, and I think we'll see that in terms of behaviour patterns and travel behaviours and patterns as well. So I think it's there to stay, and I think as well it just creates a nuance in the TRSE conversation that we have. It gives a lot of context to the conversation, to the research space, and it gives a lot of applicability to the wider world. I think sometimes TRSE can maybe seem like a bit of a concept that doesn't really apply to everyone. We can't see how it fits into the wider picture, which for TRSE, for ourselves, I would say is a compelling case in its own right anyway. But I think having this sort of extra context is very important and necessary, and just creates a better sort of narrative and allows us to advocate further for a socially inclusive transport system, which is ultimately the goal for us.
So just then going back into the report, Tom Maith, what sort of findings does the report have that will be introduced into the TRSE work to help us moving forward?
Yeah, so we did two parts of research really for this project. We did an extensive literature review, kind of looking into recent research into the cost of living impacts, and also applying that to previous TRSE research that's out there. There's not been any research that's kind of combine the two areas together, but we know through the research that they are very linked and there are similar impacts as a result of both of these issues. So we did an extensive literature review, and then the primary research included two focus groups, speaking to at-risk people from both cost of living impacts and TRSE impacts as well. And the key findings that we got were essentially people are travelling much less, which we see in wider bodies of research. How people are travelling is changing, and the reasons people are travelling are changing. Lots of different reasons for that, which are all explored in the report, but also I think everything that underpins that is that the mental health and well-being is significantly impacted as a result of these changes in travel behaviours and patterns. And everyone we spoke to in our primary research both said that it either impacted them personally, their friends and their family, or the wider community in terms of the mental health aspect of it. So those were some really key findings that I don't think we've necessarily explored as much as we have in previous research. So again, I think, as I was saying earlier, it just adds a much needed context and yeah, introduces some new themes and topics to the TRSE space that we've not necessarily had before.
And then finally, it all sounds like a really interesting report that will contribute quite compelling case to our evidence base as we look to transform the North. And Tom, when can we expect to see that report coming forward? Do you know?
Yeah, we can expect it towards the end of August sometime. So in a couple of weeks, it should be live and published.
Brilliant. So thank you to both my guests, Tom Jarvis and Tom Mace. I think it's quite clear that the TRSE work is going to be vital to the mission that we've got at Transport for the North to improve social mobility, tackle a variety of social impacts that transport has as we look to transform the North. And for more information, you can go to our website where you can get into details on the TRSE work. And as Tom Mace said, the report on the cost of living impact will be coming towards the end of the month. Thank you for listening to the TFN podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Transport for the North podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe on Spotify and SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook for all our latest updates. And join us on our website where you can find all the latest news and sign up to our All Points North newsletter.